For Silva, we were in charge of producing, I think, around 27 hours worth of sets. And for each hour of content that we produce, that can take multiple hours or even days worth of work um, for creating all the stuff by multiple people. The less fun part of it is dealing with a lot of spreadsheets and data behind the scenes. But once we have that set up, the fun part begins, which is what I would call the ultimate rhythm game.
Feel it on your skin, and you know that it won't let go.
All right, hey, thanks for stopping by. Really appreciate it.
Of course, thanks for having me.
Okay, so first and foremost, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do exactly? Like, what's your title within Furality?
Of course. So, hi, I'm Nullreff, or just Null if you want a shorter name. I go by they, them, and I am a VJ on the Club AV team at Furality.
And tell me a little bit about why exactly did you join Furality in the first place?
So, the first Furality that I attended was Aqua. I unfortunately was unable to go to Legends, but that event just really vibed with me. It was the first event that I'd been to in VR that felt like returning back to physical conventions, and it just left a big impression on me. After that event, I actually met up with Mblade at a Tailbase event. We had previously worked together doing AV for cons, and he told me that he was working on Furality and asked if I wanted to help out as well. And I was like, of course, this is fantastic. So I got brought on to work on the Club AV team. I helped with video mapping and a bit of world testing for Luma Festival, but the first big event that I got into was Silva.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you actually mentioned that you do this at several other events too, right? Can you tell us a little bit more
Yes.
about that?
Yeah, so I got my start doing AV in around 2015, actually. A while back, I've been doing this for a while. Mutual friend introduced me to one of the people running the lighting console, Turkwolf, and he let me play around with it, and from that moment I was hooked. I've always loved like the idea of concert lighting, concert visuals, all of the sort of magic that makes the experience even better, and being able to be given the controls for that was just amazing. It was just being able to press buttons. It was a lot of fun. But since then, I've worked a lot of events, all of them physical up until this point. This was actually the first virtual event that I worked.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, Club AV team, tell me a little bit more about what that team that you're on specifically does.
Of course. So for those who don't know, AV stands for audio visual. We're the ones who basically start with the DJ sets that you see, just the audio for that, and we take it and we're in charge of making the DJs look good. Basically adding all the lighting and visuals that you see to sort of amp up the set, make it more interesting, make it more exciting.
Okay. So you're basically like the really nitty-gritty part of really bringing the life out of these DJ events then for all the sets and everything like that. Okay. So can you tell me then a little bit about what is it exactly that you do within your team? And could you walk us a little bit like from start to finish to create something like at this kind of caliber?
Oh, of course. So the AV team for Furality does a lot. Attendees will come here, they'll see all the pretty lights, all the pretty visuals, just all the crazy stuff that happens in the club. Some people think that's triggered by the audio and such, but it's not. It's all manually programmed by us in like the weeks or months leading up to it, which is a lot of work. For Silva, we were in charge of producing, I think, around 27 hours worth of sets. And for each hour of content that we produce, that can take multiple hours or even days worth of work for creating all the stuff by multiple people on the team. So for all of that, the less fun part of it is dealing with a lot of spreadsheets and data behind the scenes. We have all of our DJ lineups, lighting patches, cue lists, controller bindings, video mappings, and more. And that takes a while to get all finagled into the right places and working properly. But once we have that set up, the fun part begins, which is what I would call the ultimate rhythm game. You're basically pushing buttons, moving faders, turning dials in time with the music. You're basically playing along as sort of like another instrument to what the DJ is doing. That's the really, really fun part, and that's the part I really enjoy about the process.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So-
In terms of did you want me to talk about producing a set from start to finish?
Oh, yes, please. By all means.
Of course. Yeah. So the first part of that is listening through to the set a lot. Whenever I'm doing an event, I make a playlist of all the sets from the event that I'm working, and we'll just listen to them while I'm driving around or just working on stuff. So I get the song in my head so I know exactly what's going to happen in it. The next step after that is taking notes on what's happening, figuring out what the different energy is at the points in the song, all the colors and visuals that might work well for it, lyrics that stand out that we might want to throw up on the screen, big moments within the set like the introduction or the ending, any requests that the DJ made for what sort of content they might want played or how they want us to approach it, and then even just the overall theme of this set. Like, for instance, this one by Sticky Paw. When it came to it, I wanted to make it into a space theme set because that was one of the themes that he mentioned. So I decided to call it Drum in Space, and there's a lot of space visuals in it. So once we have an idea of what we're doing, the next thing is to gather all the assets that we're using and get them prepared and imported. So this is stuff like resizing all the DJ logos, converting the format of videos, editing any custom visuals that we're going to be using, and producing lyric videos to go with it, all of that. And then from there, we need to figure out how everything is going to get mapped into the club. All of this that you see here is actually a 1920 by 1080p video being fed into the club that controls all the lighting and all the visuals. And if you look at it, it's fairly complicated. We have a lot of different slices within that control a lot of different screens and a lot of different effects and visuals. So we have to figure out where all the content that we're using is going to get mapped. Is it going to go in the smoke screen in the middle? Is it going to go on the screens on the side? Is it going to go on the wings? Is it going to go on the floor? Cool story. The floor is actually just another video screen that just gets mapped onto those cool little effects that you see with the lighting going through the cracks. So once we have that figured out, we start laying out the clips and playing around with looks, learning what works and doesn't work in world. You can imagine and think everything about what it's going to look like and what you want to do, but until you actually see it in world, it's difficult to understand what it's going to look like and the impact it's going to have. So we just spend a while programming our rigs to make the most out of what we're given in the world, and then also as we're doing that, giving feedback to the world building team, either in that, oh, if we just shifted this over it would look a lot better, or oh, what if we added this. Sometimes that works out, sometimes it doesn't. A lot of the times we're working with what we're given, and the idea is that taking that and just building the best set that we can out of it. So once we've got that sort of laid out and we have an idea of how we're going to use the world, we'll do a pass over the whole set to get an idea of how it looks as a whole, how things fit together, how they flow out. And then, at least for me, I like doing what's called time coding. There are sort of two different aspects to programming sets. There's what's called busking, which is sort of just playing along live to the music. That works well for live videos or live sets or stuff where you don't necessarily have as much time, or you just want to have a more live feel to it. And then there's time code, which is basically where you program the exact moments when things happen. The one problem with that is it gets you better results, but it's a lot more work and much more tight in terms of when stuff gets triggered. So I'll oftentimes time code out the big moments, like the introduction to a set, or maybe the ending, or maybe some big thing that happens in the middle, and then busk out the rest of it. But the one thing I can do with my setup, which I'll talk a bit more about later, is I can actually record my busking and then go back and edit it after the fact, so I can clean up any issues or problems that I have while still maintaining that sort of live organic feel to the lighting and visuals.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah, and then after that, and then we add like the pre-roll interviews and the post-roll countdown for the next set, and then ship it out to the club video team. It gets put into a big playlist so it can get played back in the club for you all.
Okay, wow, you must do a lot of like heavily collaboration work with our world building team to create Club Finn the way that it is now then.
Oh yes, of course. There has to be a lot of contact between us and the world building team in order to make things work. That usually starts out with like Rapsen, who was our AV lead for Silva, talking with them to get an idea of, okay, here's the theme. How do we want to lay out all the audiovisual elements in the club world? How do we want to make it match the theme and also create a really cool experience for our attendees? Like figuring out, how are we going to lay out all the video screens on the bird? How are we going to map the lights on the pillars there? Let's put a giant smoke screen in the middle, that kind of stuff. Just the ideas. Then world building team works on it, comes back to us, and we'll often give feedback like, could you move this screen around a little bit? Or, we need to adjust the post-processing on the lights. And just working with them to make things look pretty and make it easier for us to program content for the world.
So with all of that, like all of those different parts of the process, there must be a lot of different technical challenges that you encounter. Do you have any that like off the top of your head?
Oh, yes. I don't know if you all watched the credits for Silva, but if you saw the Club AV team postcard, it's a picture of all of us standing around a lighting console that is on fire, and we're all just freaking out. And that was very much what happened. I think I have not run into more technical issues at an event than with Silva with the software I was using. The problem is just the sheer complexity of it all. Most things, maybe for like VJing as an example, I'm only using maybe like a couple different slices for different video screens. Here, everything is a video, so we have so much content getting routed around that it gets very, very complex. And then on top of that, we've got the whole streaming pipeline going into the world that we have to worry about. And then because Furality is such a big event, we're oftentimes building custom stuff. Like during a couple sets, you may have seen like a visualizer on the wings. That was completely custom that I made in Touch Designer for it, where we basically mapped out every single feather, assigned it to a different frequency. So when the song plays back, you see that feather sort of lighting up with the frequency that's playing.
Oh, wow.
It took a lot to do that. As for sort of stories of what stood out, I can go through a lot of the major issues that I had.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, so the lighting software I use is, I ran into so many bugs with it. One of the biggest ones was I was having issues with audio dropout while I was programming. Like I'd be playing along with a set and suddenly the audio would just stop playing. So I opened a support ticket, did a whole bunch of troubleshooting back and forth with them, but what ended up fixing it was upgrading to their latest beta software. So I was actually running beta software for the entirety of Furality, and thankfully it didn't crash or go down, but that was a bit crazy. Also ran into issues with time coding offsets. Like for instance, when I'm programming stuff into the timeline of like, you just hit play and it triggers cues in sequence, nothing was showing up and I couldn't figure out why. And the reason is when you're using a Winamp with Magic Cue, which is what I was using for driving my time code, if you have it an offset of like 1 hour set by default, and I was compensating for that within like the cue stack cues that I had, but not within the timeline. So it took me a while to figure out why those weren't showing up. I also ran into an issue where like my timeline view was lagging whenever I opened it, because when you're doing an hour-long set, there's a lot of cues that go into that. So my solution was just close it and don't reopen it until the end so that I wouldn't lag while I was recording. And then also Resolume, the VJing software that I use, ran into a number of crashes in that while I was working. I figured out that if you configure your DMX input into it in a specific way, it will just crash straight up. And then also instances where I just forgot to save my work and maybe lost an hour or two because it crashed. That was very frustrating. Although the last one I was using Touch Designer, which is what I used for my like visualizers, driving playback, and a few other custom things. That crashed while trying to get a stream going out over RTSP, but their support team is fantastic. They got me a build really fast, and that fixed the issue. So good stuff.
So my biggest question then is like all of those challenges that you have to overcome, right? What would you say are like the biggest ones that you have to overcome for something like the scope of Silva?
Oh yeah, so moving past technical issues into more people issues, the largest one was probably the increase in team size. We brought on a lot of new people for Silva. So just sort of previously it was sort of just Rapson and Johari and a few other people running things, and bringing up the team to the scale, like having to delegate work around and sort of working with everyone to make sure everything was going well was a bit difficult, but we managed to come together and make it work. The team was absolutely fantastic in working together, and there were a lot of points where like things were not going well, but everyone came together in a Discord call, worked it out, figured things out, and kept pushing forward with it. The other big issue was just working with time crunch and the amount of time we had to get sets done. Like for instance, the world here was not actually finished until like the sets were almost due to go live. So we were sometimes programming blind with what we were doing and just hoping it would look good once it went live. But it ended up looking fantastic, and I'm really happy with how it turned out.
I didn't realize how many stories there are. That's so cool.
Oh yeah, a lot of stuff happened behind the scenes.
Wow.
That's not even going... I don't know if I want to talk about it too much, but this was like the most horrific time... Well, second most horrific time crunch I've ever experienced on an event.
Yeah, no,
Because,
I remember... I remember seeing a V team like in there 24 hours. Like
Yeah.
literally all day, all night. And I was just like, oh my God.
We did like 2 months worth of work in 2 weeks. And like during the con, it was like shipping out set. I basically for some sets made like a countdown of like, oh, this is when it needs to go live. This is how much time they need to edit. This is how much time I need to render it out. Okay, this is how much time I need to program. This is my drop dead time. Let's just switch and ship it out at that point.
Oh my God.
Like, I think the craziest one was I did everything for Kaiju set in just a 24-hour marathon.
So I guess my biggest thing then out of all of that is like, when it comes to just Silva as like an entire event, right? Were there any new elements or strategies that you and your team had to put into place for things to work a little bit more efficiently?
Of course. So one of the big things that changed this year was using VRSL for lighting. For those who don't know, that stands for VR stage lighting. And if you see cool, pretty lights in a more modern club world, that's oftentimes what it's being driven off of. Previously, the system that they used was just putting color directly into the video stream and having that drive the movement of the light. Rapson set that up, and while it was a really cool system, it was difficult to work with for people who didn't understand it or were used to it. The advantage with VRSL is that it can be driven by lighting consoles. So anyone who has experience programming lighting can just go in there, connect their console up to it, and just start making the lights move in the club, which is very fantastic when you have a lot of people who have experience running lights with physical rigs, but not necessarily with virtual rigs. So that really helped with bringing on more lighting people. The other strategy that I want to talk about for doing visuals that I sort of tried to champion on the team was doing time code for sets, which is essentially pre-programming a lot of big moments within it. So like the introductions and the outros and all that sort of stuff, so that you can have those very in sync with what the DJ is doing. We're going to be trying to do that going forward for more sets so we can get more of those big moments for our attendees.
So out of the entire process, right? What is personally your most favorite part?
My favorite part is actually seeing the sets play back in the club, and seeing everyone's reaction. That is the moment when you're like going through the set and being like, oh, did I mess this up? Did I not do this so well? Like, because we're just sitting in desktop mode at the club, just looking up at so we can see all the screens when we're programming. Or sometimes even just programming directly into the screen map where you can't see anything, you just see the video coming out. But hopping into VR, experiencing the club sort of in 3 dimensions around you and just taking it all in while everyone else around you is going absolutely crazy is just absolutely amazing. Yeah, gets me emotional thinking about it. If you're talking about like actually putting the sets together, finding really cool looks that match the set. Like one of my favorite moments was with Kaiju's set was the song goes whoa whoa, and I had a drone shot going at the time, and I managed to time it so right as the whoa starts, it goes into a spin and then just cuts into the next thing, which is just like abstract graphics spinning as well. So just finding those things that work together well. Yeah, and then the absolute chaos that just sometimes happens. Like, I don't want to spoil the end of Scaly's set, but yeah, that was absolutely hilarious seeing it for the first time in person, even though I knew exactly what was going to happen.
You've talked a little bit about some of the chaos and the obstacles and everything, right? But some things always don't go according to plan. So do you think that there's anything you would have done differently when it comes to Silva?
Yeah, there's a lot. I don't know if I have time to go over all of it. We covered a lot in our team retrospective that we're going to be doing differently for next year. But some of the big things for me is I want to run lights next year. I didn't get a chance to because I was so focused in on VJing, but like most of my time before this, I had spent running lights, and I only more recently picked up VJing and doing visuals. So I think having a chance to run lights for Club Fin would be absolutely fantastic. One of the other things I'm going to be doing is changing around the lighting software that I use, just because I ran into a lot of issues with it with doing timecode. So using a different solution, specifically looking at Grand MA, which, while it's kind of expensive for what we're doing here, it makes a lot of sense.
I know you talked a little bit about how great it feels when you have the attendees having a great time, right? Mm-hmm. Can you go a little, like, what kind of feelings or special feelings do you personally get when you see those kind of reactions?
Yeah, so one of my favorite, actually, this is probably my favorite moment, was the moment Foxy's set played and the intro. That was a set that I put probably the most time into out of all the ones I worked on the club. Just because, one, I love hardstyle, but also Foxy poured an enormous amount of emotion into that set. Like, while I was programming it, I cried multiple times just because there was so much stuff. If you haven't, I would recommend go watching the replay. It was really, really good. But the moment that stood out for me was at the introduction. The song goes like, "We will transform," and I decided that was the moment that we were gonna like light up the wings with like this sort of lava fire pattern and open them in time with like the drop happening. And I knew I pulled it off because when it happened, everyone's mic started clipping from them yelling so loud.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Also, the other thing wasn't like a specific moment, but just pulling it off, getting the screen mapping working for Ash Talon's set. Ash Talon put together a whole music video for their set that took like months worth of work to do, and we wanted to do it justice. So previously the idea was we would just having it play on the side screen, but that I didn't want that. I wanted it playing over the whole rig. So one of the things I did is I went through and mapped out in world space where every single video screen was on the rig, so you could play back a video kind of like you just projected it onto the whole thing. And we basically played back Ash Talon's set on that. So you can see just like full screen projected Ash just going, yeah, dancing while the set plays. It looked fantastic. Just seeing that in the club was absolutely amazing. Yeah. Something that people forget is, in addition to being staff, we're also attendees. We go to the sets, and we do this because we love the club. Like, I really genuinely enjoy watching all the sets, dancing with people, and just vibing out. That's why we do this.
I remember Foxy's set too, and how emotional it was. So yeah, kudos to all the work that you did on that one. I guess one of my other questions for you then is we've talked a little bit about like the process, right? We've talked about how AV team and how much software and coding and just like whatever, having to put all that into video form to have this play onto all of our displays here. But would you say that there's anything that you've learned specifically from Silva when it comes to like the entire process?
Of course, yeah. I think the biggest thing that I learned from this is that, like, just, it sounds kind of cheesy, but just collaboration and just working together with people, bouncing ideas off each other helped a lot. During this, we were oftentimes hanging out in a Discord call. I think you saw us. There was like someone working like every hour of the day because of all the different time zones our team is stretched across. Like, we just bouncing ideas off each other helped a lot. We would also pop into like the same world where we could have different video streams coming in for each one of us, but just like hanging out in there with each other around was very nice and just helped us keep going even when we were having a difficult time. We really, really wanted to do all the sets justice, and that takes a lot of time and effort. I severely underestimated how much time it would take to work on all this stuff. But like, some DJs have waited years to play on this stage, and oftentimes they've put in, as I said, like months worth of work into their sets and all the visuals and all the stuff that happens around it. And we want, as AV team, to make sure we do it justice to that, to make sure that we are making them look as good as possible and giving both of them and everyone who came to see their set like the experience of a lifetime with it. Oh, and one more thing. Feed Ava hardstyle. Ava is the world builder who works with us for the club AV team, and we have learned give Ava hardstyle, and they do fantastic stuff.
Nice little shout out there. I appreciate it. So, one more question for you. So, let's say that I wanted, as an audience member, to learn a little bit more about like what AV team does or anything along what you do as a profession within Club Fin. Where would I learn more, and how can I kind of get started on that?
Yeah, so one of the best places to start, in my opinion, is Bino and a number of the other Club AV team members ran a panel on it. You can actually find it on YouTube and watch it, and it goes over in very technical detail how we put together everything for Club Fin and recommendations on how to get started with it. So I would point people to that to start off and watching. Another thing you can do is download and play around with the software. Like, they mentioned some software that they work with in that panel, but like for lighting, like QLC Plus, Magic Q, Grand MA, there's a number of other options, DAS Light, number of options to try out. Just download the software, play around with the trials. For VJing, it's a bit more complicated. Resolume, which is like the standard for VJing, is kind of expensive, but you can play around with like a watermark version for free if you want to do it. But I've also seen people just like take OBS and just set up a bunch of layers and toggle them on and off to do VJing, or even if you have a pre-recorded set, you can just edit together a video for it. So that's another way to do it. Play around with the software. Another thing you can do is volunteering at events, be it virtual or physical. Oftentimes, events are looking for more people who want to get into this and are willing to teach and share the knowledge when it comes to doing audiovisual stuff. So that can be a good way to get started. That's actually how I got started, was volunteering at events and learning on the fly from what we were doing there, and then eventually got to the point where I was being the lead on events and doing my own lighting and visuals for them.
All right, Nullreff, thank you so much for being here. Is there anything else that you would like to add before we end things off?
So if you do end up playing around with audiovisual stuff and find it fun, and are interested in getting involved in helping out at Furality, you can check out team.furality.org. We post all our open positions there, and occasionally we may have some Club AV teams opening up. You could also check out Club Stream Team. They always need camera operators and technical directors. Yeah. Thank you all for listening to the interview, and we'll see you in Club Fin at the next Furality. Thank you.
Take care, everyone.